especially in India, this is gaining momentum. And there is a general perception, especially in the world outside of India, that Indian women are always treated, or have a secondary position, or that they're subjugated, or they don't have the freedom or liberty. And I've personally experienced that with a lot of people in the West, even today, have clung to those notions. So it would really help if you talked about.
Yes, I always ask my Western friends, and I don't mean it as an affront.
Right.
Why is it that with all these notions of equality, gender equality, there is a virtual disappearance of family in Europe and America? And no matter what you say, disappearance or weakening of the family has very severely damaged European and American society. It is creating immense psychological problems, and nobody can deny that. So there is something fundamentally wrong with this whole discourse of gender separation. You see, we very often think it in terms of equality. Now, first of all, the notion of equality, as it came to be propagated from the time of Rousseau, equality, fraternity, equality, fraternity, and what's the third? Three values.
Liberty.
Yeah. So they are very numerical. This is the fundamental difference. That if there are 50 people, then 50 must have a certain amount of liberty, unquestionable common denominator of liberty, common denominator of equality in terms of they can vote, or they can enter institutions, or they can conduct marriages, etc., etc. And then, of course, fraternity comes naturally out of that. This is something which has a lot to do with the industrial and the post-industrial society. It has a lot to do with the developments in modern science in which women were not required to be so busy with certain roles and activities as they were earlier. The very first was reproduction. Around 20th century, the birth rate was high and the death rate was low. Modern medicine, of course, made a big difference, and hats off to modern medicine. And so women did not have to produce 10 children, out of which 5 died. Very often 3 women out of 10 would die in childbirth. So there were women, plenty of them, who were not so occupied in certain things as they were earlier. And with industrialization, what you needed was to send those women to office, just like men. So this whole notion of equality is an economic notion fundamentally, where it is given the garb of rights, whether I have the right to work in an office, whether I have the right to travel by myself, whether I have a right to seek a job I like, etc., etc. But this is fundamentally putting women to work in the same manner, and perhaps with the same slavery,
exactly,
modernity as men. So you see, you want women to take up the roles of men, or take up the same roles. So this whole notion that men and women will do the same roles within the house, outside the house, and it will be sameness is something which can happen only after certain technological innovations and environment.
Right.
Now, to blame the ancient societies for not doing this
Right.
is not just so unkind
Yes.
towards the ancient societies, whether of anywhere, but it is ignorance.
It's ignorance. True.
So a woman had to produce 10 children, and
And this was true everywhere. It wasn't.
yes,
only
I mean,
here.
not just in India.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. It was the human condition.
Condition. Yes.
Now, if you look at that, I mean, I have given you this as a prolegomena to what I'm going to say.
Hmm.
In ancient Indian society, equality of women has to be seen in a different manner,
Hmm.
not in modern terms.
Hmm.
It is not to be seen in terms of uniformity or sameness.
Right.
Women were able to do the same jobs as men, and were they able to dress the same way? Were they able to choose their sexual partner the same way? So if you put aside the sameness for a while, and if you look at what women were doing, not were allowed to do, but what women were doing, then you'll see that they did not have a raw deal.
Hmm.
It's a modern notion that the old ancient Greek woman was just restricted to weaving, and she had to sit at home and weave the rugs and all that, and just go from kitchen to the weaving room, from weaving room to the kitchen. Now, this is all a modern prejudice and a distortion of the ancient Greek life, or similarly the Hindu life. For the life, sociological life of social life of women, you have to read the Kama Sutra.
Hmm.
As I told you a few minutes back, that the sexual encounter, it was suggested, prescribed, or admonished, or propagated through literature. The sexual encounter had to be with mutual affection, with equality. This is what the whole Kama Sutra is about.
Right. Right.
It's not a glorification of ancient India. There is textual evidence.
References. Right.
Then women, the Kama Sutra says, will be educated at the house of the father,
Hmm.
after marriage at the house of the husband. It is explicit there. Of course, women were married early.
Hmm.
There is no point in making apologies as to why they were married at the age of 14. Okay, as soon as they reach puberty, soon after they were married because they had to reproduce 10 children.
Correct.
And if they were to be married at the age of 30 today, as they are, then they'll have only 2 children with medical help.
True.
So the ancient societies, they looked at it this way. So as I was telling you, the freedom of women consisted in fulfilling themselves as educated women. And the Kama Sutra makes it very clear.
Very clear. Right.
Now, the Kama Sutra also gives you a detailed account of what they were to be taught.
Hmm.
And they were to be taught by private tuition and
Interesting.
by certain other means. And it is not vague that, yes, they were taught. No, they were taught 64 arts. And these 64 arts are not just some petty small skills like making garlands or designs or, weaving the carpet or something. They were very sophisticated knowledge systems like philosophy, like study of arts, like study of dance, poetry, music. So they were what you would call today, by all means, what you would call as higher education.
Bharaji, was this only for the courtesans, though? This is something
No,
I
no,
wanted
no,
to.
this is not for the courtesan.
Okay.
This is for the average woman.
Oh.
Now, obviously, uh, in any society, a woman of no means or a woman of poor status will not go for any education.
Hmm.
She would be compelled to just, scrounge for a living. So we are talking here of, let us say, the middle class
Hmm.
and upwards. India was always a middle class society.
Hmm.
It was not like ancient Egypt or Greece or China, where you had only the rulers and the ruled.
Hmm.
It was not like Europe, where you had the royalty and the serfs. The bulk of the people in India were middle class.
Right.
They were Vaishyas and Shudras, prosperous.
Hmm.
And even the Shudra women would learn their arts related to their profession, related to their jati at home.
Hmm.
And women of Vaishya, women of Kshatriyas and Brahmins would
Hmm.
go for all these higher systems of education and arts. The Kama Shastra narrates the 64 kalas, the 64 arts.
Hmm.
And they were practiced because you have evidence of it. After all, how did Indian society become such a productive society in the field of arts? Can you tell me a country which produced as much art as India did? I sometimes offend my Western friends, and more so some of those Indians who live in the West or teach in the West, by saying that India produced more art than any other culture. But this is a simple fact.
This is a fact.
You see, our whole system emphasized on patronizing the art. Everybody was asked to patronize art, not just the kings, but the common man was asked to patronize the art.
Hmm.
It was part of his grihastha karma, grihastha dharma. As a householder, he was supposed to finance the education, where the brahmacharis or the students could go and learn for free.
Right.
He was supposed to provide for those who had retired to the forest after giving up the grihasthashram duties.
Hmm.
So it was a society in which dan and dan for arts, all
Hmm.
kinds of arts and artists and sustaining artists, was a major sociological system.
Very true.
And this is where in modern India, under the Nehruvian system, which followed the Soviet model of academies, this is where the great mistake was made, that we have a system where we provide patronage to arts through bureaucratic orders and bureaucratic identification.
Yes.
Whereas in ancient India, we simply provided direct help to the artist, to the artisan, to the creator of the arts. One of the greatest institute which patronized art and provided a place for arts and artists, dancers, poets, musicians, grammarians, scientists, scholars, was the Hindu temple.
Exactly.
And also the courtesan houses. The courtesan house is housed in a limited manner, but the temple in a vast manner. And the temple economy in India was a vast economy. That's why the temples were prosperous also. So they were prosperous just as certain corporate houses are. But the corporate houses today are based upon greed, upon collecting money and power and going in for cutthroat competition. Whereas the temples were for the benefit of all sections of society. From the very poor people who would provide garlands and cleaning and things like that at the temple, to the scholars, to the pandits, to the archakas, to the shilpis, to the architects. So everybody had a very solid function to perform. And the Hindu temple was able to provide them patronage. And all this patronage was artistic. Even our puja, our archana was artistic.
True.
It was not
Very
or it was not, austere. It was something beautiful. So gods were praised. Aarti was done 3 times with dance, with music. In great temples, the dancers who would do the Aarti along with the archakas and along. I think we have to discover why arts were a fundamental part of the Purusharthas, Dharma, Kama, Moksha. Why they were considered as leading towards the divine. Art being a door to the divine was a common belief and practice in India. Every artist said that by pursuing art, he is progressing or she is progressing towards something higher and communicating with the highest.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.